Yeah, we worked out quite a lot of things. It was a really exciting project. It really gave us the opportunity to learn quite a lot about taking techniques that we already knew, design techniques through cinema, film, theatre, and adapting those and looking at the new ways that we had to approach designing the piece of work was interesting. As we started and gradually developed the design, we found ourselves moving up and away from paper and notation and annotations into actually working within the space and treating very much our designs with the awareness of the 3D nature of the technology and augmented reality, taking us beyond traditional sort of confines of the screen for film and being much more performative like it was in the theatre perhaps. And so even though that's the end product, that's also become part of the process of developing is to really put yourself in the position of the audience. One of the things that we really have found is that we do believe that this technology is really giving us opportunities to open quite a few doors and access areas where we can tell stories that are much more freer and out there in the world. That really does give us an opportunity to make new connections to spaces and places that people have. We've created stories in this context of history, and it really does bring to light a few things from the design process. For example, we know that interactivity is a very powerful tool and that it really does involve the audience. And in this context, there's been times where we really have been using interactivity to affect the emotions and the actions, opinions of the audience with regards to their relationship to history, to what they know. And I think that was interesting. It's apparent that it will and can involve people more in the storytelling process, and the end result is a bit like a performance, a bit more like a performative drama where the audience are able to sort of walk around and move around the space as well as move their arms and play and jump, and so that interactivity is really important. In the context of history, it can have quite acute effects on how people feel about their history. That means you've got to be quite careful about where you put interactivity in such a context. Another thing I noticed was it does change, the augmented reality changes the property of the media elements you're putting together. When I say change, I mean from my own experience of theatre and film, it creates more like hanging objects. They're more like mobile. It's like a media mobile where objects are existing in space and time rather than taking it away from that linear sort of film or theatre experience. For example, sound kind of hangs in the space. You walk past the sound. It becomes a locator and a guider. And I think one of the keys to designing in this kind of space where you're designing a connection between several independent episodic stories are the transitions, the links, the way in which somebody travels their eye, their ear, their attention, and now their body towards from one story to another. A lot of attention needs to be paid on how those transitions work together so that they do act as a director and they do help to guide and maintain that engagement across episodes and within the whole space. From a sort of an organisational point of view, a lot of work has gone into organising and coordinating and communicating with the various people in the project. That was a challenge, and there was some of those challenges were overcome by using, for example, Basecamp. That was quite an effective way to kind of monitor and keep ahead and track of what people were doing, but also to allocate tasks. So I think that proved quite useful. But I do think it was a very stretching project for the budget that it had. And for the people and the timescale it had, people were really, really stretched. And I think in hindsight, really, we needed to spend a little bit more time thinking about the size of the project and what was realistically possible within the scale of what was offered to us in terms of time and budget. So, for example, I think we needed to spend a little bit more time, finances and allocation to research assistants, people who were able to dedicate their time to collecting and preserving the data as we collected it. It's been a really enjoyable experience to work with 3 different distinct organisations who each one has been able to bring its expertise to the project. So without the guidance of historians and the experience of the castle in terms of its ability to be able to engage an audience and create a display that talks about history, the researchers' backgrounds in theatre and film and the techniques of design, together with the Hot Knife digital audio, together with Hot Knife, means that each area has been able to kind of have an expert here to help make that gel and marry. I wish we had longer on the project, but these projects can go on for forever. But I think really the biggest thing that has come out for me is there truly is a potential to tell stories through this medium that takes it that step further beyond what virtual reality can offer and beyond what our existing more traditional disciplines of theatre and film could do, particularly because it gets you out into the world, which fundamentally is you know. From my discipline or my background in filmmaking, it's been for a long time I have been very frustrated with the square frame. The fact that the film determines how far you can look and see, and now this kind of technology kind of opens some of the doorways and offers us new solutions to that, the confinement of that screen. So for example, like sound in film, sound can come from yesterday, it can come from behind us. It gives us a bigger impression of the environment beyond what we can see, and from my opinion has always been an extremely valuable tool in storytelling in film. And I think that the sound is acting in a very similar way here, so that when your eye follows from one graphic overlay to another, the sound can actually be the join, the glue that takes you from one story to the next, but also gives you the cues of when to interact, when to turn around and when to perform with the piece of work. But also, our stories are kind of going beyond the square of the frame. Even though they are stuck within the confines of the view, people can see overlay into the real world, and that's kind of pushing the boundary a little bit more like the cave paintings that didn't have this square frame, where you can overlay stories without those sort of technological boundaries. The suspension of disbelief possibly enough that means that we ignore the screen now, much in the same way that we kind of ignore the fact that the sound comes out of speakers. And so for me, it's a really exciting way of looking at new forms of composition, new forms of transition, as well as being able to take the film out of the screen and of the confines of the building, but actually into the real world, which is the source of all our stories in the first place. That's really exciting.
I like that. No, that's good.
Was that right?
Yeah.
Oh.
No, you're good.